Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Waymaker Podcast, where we learn how the authentic self makes a way to the life we desire. The show where we dive deep into the science of change. Everyone is on a one-way developmental trajectory through life. Major life transitions can be incredibly defeating. Breaking up or going through a divorce can break your spirit. Getting physically fit is incredibly hard. Controlling your diet is really difficult. Getting sober can seem impossible. And improving our relationships with our loved ones feels a lot more challenging than it should. Why is that? If you've ever wanted to understand why it is so hard to change and desire to find ways to make changing easier, then you are in the right place. On this show, we are going to explore the real reason why change is so incredibly difficult, from the mental blocks that keep us stuck in old patterns to the physical habits we've built over time. Change doesn't just happen by wanting it. It requires an understanding of the mechanics of how our brains work, how our bodies respond to stress, and how emotions shape our decisions. Whether you're tackling major life transitions, striving to break free from old habits, or simply just looking for ways to grow, this is the show for you. Today we're kicking off the very first episode of Waymaker, and it's only fitting that we start by talking about one of the most crucial elements of transformation: attachment. We often hear about attachment, but what does this really mean, and how does it shape your life? But before we get started, just a little bit about me. My name is Josh, and I'm a career soldier in an Army National Guard combat unit. I have a criminal justice career specializing in corrections, which is the science of changing behaviors. I did my graduate work in psychology and criminal justice. I have experienced multiple major life transitions, like switching back and forth from military life to civilian life and combat deployments, going through a divorce, and getting sober at a young age. I have successfully navigated an adverse life while developing an academic, military, and criminal justice career. Crucial to getting through it all was mastering fitness and nutrition. I have overcome and continue to overcome personal challenges like transitional stress, work-life balance, addiction, injury recovery, and more. My life's work has really been focused on how to help people survive overwhelming circumstances and transform those experiences into fuel for evolution, growth, and success. Every failure leaves behind the seeds of an equivalent success. Failure is the inevitable outcome of being inauthentic. What is authentic works, and what isn't authentic does not work. If our attachment has been insecure as we were growing up, we are at risk of attaching to things that only consume our time, energy, and money, but do not produce fruit toward a vision of the future. We will talk about a real-life example of someone who shifted from seeing failure as defeat to seeing it as a crucial part of their journey to success. We'll also discuss actionable steps to start tearing away from unhealthy attachments in your daily life. Whether it's through reframing how you view the past, practicing resilience, or finding ways to embrace discomfort as a catalyst for growth, by the end of this episode, you'll have the tools and insight to begin making that shift for yourself. So, if you feel stuck or defined by your past mistakes, this episode is for you. Together, we'll start rewriting the narrative, discovering that each failure, each loss that you endure is not a dead end, but rather a new pathway to the life you desire. Let's make a way forward. If you find this episode meaningful and you want to see more content from the Waymaker Podcast, make sure that you subscribe so that you'll be notified of future episodes. You can also follow us on Facebook on the Waymaker Life Coaching page. All right, so let's get right to it. Now, I understand that not everyone listening has studied psychology extensively and may not be familiar with the term attachment. So let's do a quick definition of what attachment means. Attachment theory is what we call a foundational theory in psychology. By foundational, it is one of the most heavily researched and supported theories. We are pretty damn sure that this is how it works. At the most basic level, attachment theory looks at how infants attach to their earliest caregivers, usually their mother, and how she can induce a relaxation response for the baby when he or she is stressed. If you're taking notes, this is a key takeaway. Attachment is how we respond to stress. Love and connection is the premier method of relaxing. It's the purest anxiolytic. Anxiolytic is a big fancy word that simply means anti-anxiety. Anything that is an anxiolytic functions as an anti-anxiety pattern in our brain. Our dependence on others has been paramount to our survival for eons. Not being connected or loved by the tribe equals death. Human infants cannot relax on their own. To speak scientifically, the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system will not activate without a trusted caregiver, signaling to the infant that the environment is safe. That's a bunch of more big words that really just mean that how we regulate our body and emotions and our ability to relax is dependent on how well connected, how pure the connection is with other people and the tribe. Cuddling, eye contact, nose rubs, little kisses, and cooing, all these are signals to the child, to the infant, that he or she can relax. This process templates for the developing nervous system a cycle of stress and relaxation. The baby's ability to communicate his or her stress and have it responded to appropriately is the very beginning of developing competence, which is defined as the ability to produce desired results. This is another takeaway. There's a strong relationship between stress, attachment, and competence. What is your relationship with stress like, and how well do you produce desired results? These are central concepts to the science of change. Understanding how your nervous system has developed over your life course is vital to understanding what you may need to change in order to reach your goals. Now back to the infant. In ideal circumstances and when things are good and the mother is not preoccupied with her own unresolved emotional problems, she can be fully present and successfully bond with the child. In a sense, if her authentic self is more fully developed, she can be more fully present with the child, which ironically aids in the development of the child's authentic self. The very structure of the baby's brain grows to be centered around trusting his or her caregiver and that the environment is safe and supported. The more a child's dependency/attachment need is met, the more independent they will be as an adult, and life for them will be more about connection as opposed to survival. Now, if the mom was not well supported as a child and did not get to develop her full authentic self, she may be preoccupied, even if subconsciously, especially if now in the present day she had a baby with a partner who is also not very supportive, or a partner that is absent altogether. Authenticity is also a need. If this need is not met, it becomes a painful hunger and significantly impacts our experience of life. The absence of love is experienced as shame, and there is a feeling of loneliness and isolation. This generally results when we are growing up and no one seems to care about the things that are important to us, or we get ignored when we are trying to call attention to something that bad has happened to us. So let's do a quick recap. We've been talking about the intergenerational aspect of human development. If mom had loving parents with a lot of support, love, attention, and connection, she would be able to more fully develop in the security of that environment. She would be less overwhelmed by anxiety and make less impulsive decisions. She is far more likely to choose a good partner who would be present for the baby's birth and life. In this way, she has less to worry about and can be more fully present with her infant. Being fully and consciously present with the infant provides a sense of connection that communicates worth and safety. The mother sees and reinforces the child's authentic self, reducing the infant's feeling of stress and anxiety, which allows for maximum growth. Imagine being in a classroom on a military base. How well would you be able to learn in that classroom if there was a battle going on outside the gate, and you could hear gunfire and feel explosions? Compare that to if you were in a classroom in a safe, quiet place that hasn't had a war for centuries. The brain would automatically divert resources from attention, learning, and memory to predicting if there is going to be a threat and where you would need to run for safety. These systems are automatic and nonverbal. Conversely, if the mother is overwhelmed in stress and has never felt very loved and connected, she is too preoccupied with all the threats that seem to be coming at her to be fully present with her infant. Science is very clear about this. Love does not always conquer all. If the mother's authentic self has not been fully developed, it will be more difficult to stay present and to beam all the love into the infant that the baby requires. This is why it is important that when your 3-year-old comes to you with an ordinary rock that they found on the ground, and they are excited about it, you also get excited about that ordinary rock. It communicates to the child that what is authentically important to him or her is also important to you. You reify their authentic interest and truly know your child. Preoccupied parents may be annoyed by their child bringing them an ordinary rock, because they are too busy trying to find security and support amongst all the threats of life to care about an ordinary rock. This is, of course, a spectrum with child abuse, neglect, and maltreatment on one extreme, and at the other end of the spectrum is the perfectly loving and supportive home. Longitudinal or long-term studies that looked at lifetime outcomes of individuals based on how loving and supportive their home environment was. They found that the most loving, connected homes resulted in the highest successes. The researchers concluded that you cannot love babies and children too much. Unfortunately, this is a very small minority of people who are perfectly supported in this optimum way. The vast majority of us do not grow up in environments that fill our bucket, so to speak, with love, connection, and safety, and we are subject to adversity and survival. This is not to play the blame game. There are plenty of situations where the parents just weren't able to provide security, connection, and love that their children needed because of life circumstances. Maybe one of the parents passed away, or there was a divorce, or a mental health disorder, or one or both parents had to work long hours to pay the bills, and being exhausted, they weren't able to contribute the way that their child needed with attention. A child's need for attention is enormous. That's why the old saying says it takes a village to raise a child. So what happens if a child's need for attachment and a need for authenticity are not balanced as they are growing up? The child may intuitively learn how to attach to things that distract or numb them from the pain of not feeling authentically supported. Another term for this comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, called experiential avoidance. If the child is experiencing discomfort and they have this longing to be seen for who they are, a longing that they can't even be aware of or know how to articulate, by default they may learn how to just psychologically avoid this experience of discomfort. I'm going to take a moment here to reinforce a critical area of discussion, which is the fact that these problems are nonverbal. Avoidance and getting attached to things that are at odds with our authenticity happens at a nonverbal level. It's emotional and experiential. These are the deeper issues of the heart that are difficult to describe. We live in a world that wants to label everything and talk about everything to death. But you can talk about emotional adversity until you're blue in the face, but it won't heal anything in the way that genuine connection to a caring person can heal them. Talk therapy can be useless when what a person needs is a faithful ally who loves and supports them no matter what. So let's do another quick recap. We all have an enormous need for love and attention as we're growing up, like water and sunshine for the authentic self. This is a spectrum with few in our society getting water and sunshine in the proper abundance that leads to maximized competence and growth. In the absence of a fully developed authentic self, we tend to fill this void with things that distract or numb our feelings. These are maladaptive attachments. Some call them addictions. The Judeo-Christian tradition calls it Egypt or Pharaoh, or this is really the concept of sin. Buddhists call this misperception. Acceptance and commitment therapy calls it experiential avoidance. Whatever we want to label it, nearly everyone to some degree has an attachment to things that help them fill the void of the absence of love, connection, insecurity, inspiration, being in alignment even vocationally with a job, a career that fulfills us and is adequate for sustaining life as far as income goes. These are all things that we get in the way because we attach to things that just try to numb the pain. And most people are in denial about how deep this pain really is. Now that we have established that there are deep roots of our perception built into our brain structure from our childhood, and these often non-verbally affect how we view the world and our relationships with romantic partners, friends, money, employment, etc., we will start to look at what ways we start to attach to things that are not in alignment with our authentic self. Think of it like this: someone teaching you how to read a life blueprint. If you were raised by someone who didn't know how to read the blueprint very well themselves, and they're the ones that taught you how to read the blueprint, and now you're trying to build the structure of your life based on faulty understanding, should it be a surprise that there are issues in the foundation or the framing? The blueprint is the authentic self, the fully realized, fullest version of yourself. You could say this is God's plan for your life. The blueprint is the design. It is built into all of us. It is the fiber of our being. You will not find the love and wisdom you are really searching for until you take a deeper look. Anything we try to build that is not true to the blueprint will become painful. Pain is a sure sign that you are not building according to the design of your life. We may have had grand dreams for ourselves and work ourselves to death trying to achieve them, but I assure you there's nothing in comparison to the reality of the blueprint, the design for your life. The real structure is always vastly more amazing and beautiful than anything we can think of for ourselves, and building it according to the proper understanding of the blueprint is far more effortless than grinding away with something that doesn't really serve you. This is why it requires faith, to abandon our petty plans and schemes and endeavor to pursue the highest calling. The true self never holds your mistakes or misperceptions against you. Its mercies are new every morning. Learning to focus your mind on the thoughts of the authentic self can be a lifelong struggle. This is the fullest realization of change, is to learn to harness your mind's attention and dedicate it almost entirely to vision, to holding in mind the highest vision of your life. One small example to help highlight this situation is an adolescent boy whose authentic self has not been properly supported. Maybe he is not very accepted by his peer group, and he starts finding escape by watching action movies with the theme of the masculine male killing the bad guy, saving the world, and getting the perfect-looking girl. He may find that attractive women in general produce a pleasure response just by looking at them, and he becomes preoccupied with looking at attractive women on Instagram, Snapchat, and the vast array of digital media depictions of attractive women who are looking approvingly at the camera. Approval from a member of whatever category we perceive as being attractive is incredibly drug-like. Studies have shown conclusively that when men look at images of pretty faces, smiling approvingly at the camera, their brains light up like the 4th of July with dopamine. The reality is, though, that none of these women care whatsoever about the men or boys whose attention they are consuming. They just want advertising dollars, or use that attention for some cheap substitute for self-esteem. We will discuss that more in the episode on lust. While it is innocent to desire and dream of an attractive partner, in the absence of love and connection, this can become idol worship, an addiction to an unrealistic ideal. Considering how we intuitively learn cost-benefit analysis as we get older, even when the young man tries to date and he experiences rejection, he learns how much risk is involved in a romantic partnership, and he may become ever more insistent on finding this perfect reward to make up for the incredible risk. It is an illusion, but the perfect soulmate starts to become an idol in his life. When he fantasizes about meeting the one, he finds relief and hope that at last he may be seen and loved for who he is. This fantasy can become a foundational motivation throughout his life to try and be a war hero, or devote himself to making a lot of money, or killing himself in the gym week after week trying to bring the fantasy to life. Perhaps he goes the other direction and he feels the object of his desire is impossible, and he becomes depressed and lets himself go. Being at a nonverbal emotional level, he may not even be conscious of it, and it could even disrupt his ability to form intimacy because he is in love with a fictional woman who doesn't exist. He may even have multiple versions of these brides in his mind who he fantasizes about, to which no woman can compare. They become part of the illusion and a mental prison that keeps him in chains and prevents him from ever forming a true partnership with a real woman. These are maladaptive strategies, meaning that they help him to adapt to stress, but they ultimately work against his genuine goals and identity. This highlights the theme of sacrificing long-term benefits for short-term gain. With a lack of authenticity, one can become attached to things that provide short-term benefits at the expense of long-term goals and identity, an identity that's in alignment with the true self. When we attach to illusions about things, behaviors, people, substances, all things that may benefit us in the short term help us survive, but ultimately they sabotage our long-term interest. We call this maladaptive attachment or attachment substitutes. Maladaptive attachment or attachment substitutes is the process of becoming deeply attached to things that do not align with our authentic self, whether it's substances, people, careers, ideals, or beliefs. It's a common developmental problem that often stems from early conditioning, where we learn to seek external validation or comfort in ways that disconnect us from who we really, truly are. As we grow, these attachments can become crutches, preventing us from confronting our deeper emotional needs or pursuing a path that genuinely resonates with our inner values. Misattachment often manifests as an unhealthy dependency, or what we could call the dependency trap, a dependency on a relationship that's toxic, a career that drains our passion, or substances that numb our feelings, leaving us stuck in cycles of dissatisfaction, disconnection, and even self-destruction. The challenge lies in recognizing these misalignments and understanding that real fulfillment comes not from attaching ourselves to these external sources, but from developing a stronger connection with our authentic self and the vision that we hold for our life. Only then can we begin to live and make choices that reflect our true nature. We tend to build illusions and become attached to them through our stressful experiences in youth. We use these to comfort us. We come to cherish these illusions and ideals as being the source and end goal of life that we think will fulfill us. We may sacrifice authentic connection to win the heart of someone we're attracted to, or a well-providing partner, even if they are a difficult or unhappy person, and we may never find fulfillment with them. Or we may sacrifice pursuing our dreams to build a career that pays really well with stability, but is ultimately unfulfilling. We may overuse alcohol and other substances to gain acceptance by a social group, and we may overspend accumulating debt to pay for things that we don't need, to impress people we don't even like. Almost everyone has some form of obesity in their life. Obesity is a visual form of what many others have going on in a more invisible way. It is clear sign that someone has an unhealthy relationship with food. It is obvious to any casual observer that someone should not be ordering a supersized meal at McDonald's with an extra side of chicken nuggets and a dessert. But the insanity of maladaptive attachments can easily have someone driven to overconsume to get their need met for the numbing effect of enjoying food, only to feel remorse and regret afterwards. This is called hedonic eating or overeating. It is when someone consumes food for the emotional or psychological fulfillment rather than for nutrition. These are the types of behaviors and thought processes that leach our vital mental energies. Unhooking from these patterns is painful, costly, and it's often a bloody battle with the lower self, filled with setbacks, relapses, failures, and merciless doubt. The way forward is the path of the warrior. This is why the Christians say that Satan wants you to be in the defeat. He wants you in hopelessness. He does not want the design, with a capital D, to succeed. The design of the authentic self. He is a saboteur or a character defect that comes only to rob and steal and destroy. He or it comes at people with deception, promising glittering prizes through temptation. It only gives temporary highs and produces no fruit in the long term. Whether you believe in such entities or not is irrelevant to the fact that these patterns exist. Here is your simple guide. Does this behavior, illusion, or thought pattern, or whatever you want to call it, does it just consume energy and produce no fruit? Imagine how bountiful your life would be if you put all of your time, energy, and money only into endeavors that produce fruit over time. If you weeded out every wasteful weed in your garden and pruned every underproducing plant, and all the sunshine and water went only to what produces fruit in your life, wouldn't you have abundance? One of the most important Bible verses comes from Jeremiah 17:9 and 10. And this is from the Message translation of the Bible. The heart is hopelessly dark and deceitful, a puzzle that no one can figure out. But I, God, search the heart and examine the mind. I get to the heart of the human. I get to the root of things. I treat them as they really are, not as they pretend to be. Here we see how the ultimate truth, the highest good, does not accept the illusion. This is the central human problem, our difficulty in differentiating between truth and falsehood. Life cannot be fooled. Living an inauthentic life will result in catastrophic failures. These failures are actually a blessing if we accept them. They burn off everything that wasn't working and leave behind fertile soil for new growth. To help us get a better understanding, let's look at a real-life example. Tim was born to a well-to-do family in a small Midwestern town. His father, being a successful dentist and good provider, was also unfortunately immature and preoccupied with his own unresolved emotional needs. His mother and father had married under the pressure of the community because she had become pregnant with Tim at 20 years old. The couple were not well suited to each other, and while they looked happy on the outside, behind closed doors there was a lot of fighting and unhappiness. Tim discovered that he got the most praise and attention from his parents when he excelled at sports, and although he wasn't that fond of football, he put all his energy into being the best player that he could be. By high school, he was an all-star player, but the status and acclaim weren't enough. He was introduced to alcohol and found that he could drink and become the life of the party. Most of his social relationships were shallow and premised on false identity he was building to try to fill the empty void and loneliness he felt as a result of no one knowing or caring about his true, authentic self. His athletic successes earned him a scholarship to college, and under pressure to be successful by his father, he ended up in law school. There he met a high-achieving woman, Jenny, who was impressed by his athletic ability and vocational pursuits. He became an attorney, married Jenny, and they had 2 children together. The home life he had hoped to avoid, one of unhappiness and fighting, was slowly becoming a reality. He sunk deeper into alcoholism and dreaded the workday at the office, performing the duties he found dull and unfulfilling. He struggled to remain faithful, often flirting with other women and frequently fantasizing about an affair. He missed the false feeling of approval he received from meeting new sexual prospects. By 35 years old, he was out of shape, addicted to alcohol, and avoided his family and the office. His mental health was taking a nosedive, and suicide started to become a real possibility. He was so attached to the illusory ideals that he had become misattached to in his youth that he could not imagine losing the lucrative career and the high-status woman. Just the prospect of selling his newly built home caused him to become physically ill. His drinking became compulsive, and he rarely drew a sober breath for 3 years. Finally, in collapse, a colleague from the office arranged an intervention. He is given the ultimatum by the firm. Either he goes to alcohol treatment or he would have to resign. Failure. David Hawkins once wrote, "We either develop an attitude of humility or we have humility forced on us by our ineptitude." There was no way out. The night before going to inpatient treatment, he sat in his car in the garage with a loaded pistol in his lap, and he contemplated whether he should just start the car and let it run or to use the pistol on himself. He surrendered and went to treatment. In treatment, he is angry and resistant, but without the numbing power of alcohol, the pain and loneliness he has carried his whole life begins erupting. Finally, the moment of genuine surrender happens. The great poet Rumi once wrote, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." His heart finally broke wide open, and a flood of tears, sadness, and suffering poured out of him in his small groups and counseling sessions. An entire lifetime of pain accumulated from being misattached to illusions had culminated in a vulnerability he didn't know was possible. There he found acceptance among his counselors and peers, people who had supported his authentic self and loved him in a way he had never experienced. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. Psalm 51:17. This is true repentance. The admission of living an inauthentic life coupled with a sincere desire to live with courage and be true to himself. Tim had tried to live a life above vulnerability and emotional connection to others, but at long last he had surrendered to the reality that he is just as human and limited as everyone else. He gave in to the fact that he needs authenticity and healthy attachments. Finally, he was able to take his place among the people and to be just another person trying to navigate a complicated world filled with adversity. After treatment, he joined a support group and he and his wife got into marriage counseling. Both came to terms with the faulty ideals they had both centered their lives around. They decided to become mature adults and moved their lives in an entirely new direction. Tim left the firm and began a journey of self-exploration. Eventually he discovered a love and passion for both history and teaching and started a new career as a history professor. They sold their exorbitant home and started a new life on a quiet street in a small city. They found compassion for each other's hardships of living an inauthentic life and came to honor the true identity that had been dormant in the depths of their hearts. They repaired the fractured relationships with their children and became truly supportive of what their 2 kids wanted for themselves. And both grew up to be well-rounded adults with happy lives and became productive members of society. From this example, we can see how the inevitable catastrophe was vital to Tim's lifelong search for love and wisdom, even if he wasn't aware of this calling throughout the years. The collapse of the structure he had built in the sand was critical to him being able to begin building a new structure built upon the rock of the authentic self. This heartrending and devastating experience turned out to be the best possible thing that could have happened to him, and the seeds of genuine success were left behind in the rubble of what appeared initially as incomprehensible failure. Now, fortunately, not everybody needs to go to these extremes in order to head off trouble at the pass. A person that wants to be more successful or to find a path that is more fulfilling could start doing some self-examination now. The denial wall is thick and powerful, but once people become aware of this information, they have the opportunity to start a deeper examination and to see if there isn't false attachments, false illusions that are hemming them up. There's a quote that I like by David Hawkins. At some point the illusion breaks down and the opening for the start of the spiritual quest commences. The quest turns from without to within, and the search for answers begins. Years ago, I went to coffee with a wise friend of mine. At the time, I was in my early 20s and working at Jiffy Lube. I had no idea how I was going to make it in the world, and I had no prospects for a romantic partner. I was likely feeling sorry for myself and complaining about my life. My friend said to me, "There's absolutely nothing I would change about my life. I know that I am exactly where I am supposed to be, going through exactly what I am supposed to be going through, to learn exactly what I came to this life to learn." This is the first of the actionable steps. We can call this the paradox step. We find the wisdom of Yoda here. Do or do not, there is no try. Many people are struggling and trying to change, but find themselves in repeated cycles. You can't feel your chains until you start pulling on them. Trying to change without progress is still better than not being aware of them at all, like those who are still asleep. The paradox is that we surrender to win. Surrender to the reality that if you could just change your behavior by deciding, you would have done it already. The first actionable step, tell yourself, there is absolutely nothing I would change about my life. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, going through exactly what I am supposed to be going through, to learn exactly what I came here to learn. The brilliant Carl Jung said that what we resist persists, and what we embrace dissipates. It works backwards from what we think, like riding a bicycle where the handlebars are reversed. I use the analogy of building a Lego set to help my kids understand this concept. Imagine you're building a Lego set and at step 14 you put a piece in backwards, which wasn't a problem until now at step 32 that piece is in the way and it's impossible to move forward. At first it's not obvious that a piece is backward, and you keep trying and try to put the next piece in correctly, but it's just not fitting. You're getting really frustrated. You suspect that you made a mistake at an earlier step, but you aren't sure where, and you don't want to start all over. At some point, you surrender to the reality that there is no way forward, and you have to deconstruct your work and step by step re-examine the placement of each piece until you find where your mistake is in the past and correct it. Then you resume building. Now you are paying closer attention. You have become more wise about how you construct this Lego set. Learning to enjoy gaining in wisdom and actually getting on a path that really goes somewhere is much better than trying to grind yourself to ashes, trying to make something work that isn't meant to work. To enjoy the process rather than trying to rush to some end result, being dead set on getting to the end product and having no willingness to admit mistakes and start over, is exactly what prevents one from ever getting to an end result. Most people know the things that they need to do. They are just in denial about them. You probably know what you need to do to quit drinking or smoking, to lose weight, or improve your diet and get fit, fix things with your spouse, or let go of a bad relationship, start a business, or get an education, or advance your career. You are in denial and not accepting the discomfort, hard work, and perhaps complete rearrangement of your life that may be necessary. Take a deep breath and repeat this to yourself. There is absolutely nothing about my life I would change. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, going through exactly what I am supposed to be going through to learn exactly what I am here to learn. Cease fighting anything and anyone, and surrender to the discomfort of your current situation. I can say this with assurance because everyone is struggling if they are honest. One of the keys to growing without so much pain is to simply accept limitations and misperceptions as a part of being human, and that we're just one among many. In the next episode, we'll begin discussing how to identify your chains. What is the real Egypt that you are enslaved by? Which of your thought patterns represents Pharaoh? And more importantly, what thought patterns represent Moses? This is the basic program of change, growth, evolution, and success. Number 1, accepting and surrendering to the reality that you are in some type of Egypt of misperceptions. You are only hemmed in by your own belief systems. Number 2, building the motivation to leave Egypt and whatever compulsive, impulsive behaviors and addictions and any other type of compulsive behaviors that are holding you back. To flee from old patterns, chains, addictions, or relationships that are consuming your vital time, energy, and money. Number 3, stepping out in faith into the unknown wilderness of deprivation and journey toward the promised land, guided only by a faithful vision. Number 4, building the courage to actually enter the promised land, even in the face of convincing misperceptions about the forces that oppose you. Number 5, arrival and settling into your new home, your new life, building and maintaining self-determination, abundance, security, and a future for yourself and your children. Thanks for listening, and until next time, so long.